take off, take flight with you. For we never fly, but we're flying.
Welcome back to another episode on Take Flight Podcast. This is episode 213, and it's a takeaway episode with myself, Pabilo Timbo. And today I've decided to share a few insights into a book I was recently reading, which is called Preparing Heirs: 5 Steps to Successful Transition of Family Wealth and Values. Now, for those who've been following my content for the last few years will definitely understand that I'm relatively passionate about creating wealth with a focus also on generational wealth and how to become, really good at being able to pass your wealth down for generations and create that level of success. Now, generational wealth, in my opinion, I think has become a buzzword over the last few years. I think those who actually have wealth understand it's not as easy as it may seem to just sort of pass it down to your children or to any beneficiaries. And those who are sort of trying to accumulate wealth just think that once they actually have it, everything will sort of sort itself out, and they'll be able to successfully pass it on to whoever they choose. I'll start with a statistic, and the statistic is in the study across 3,250 wealthy families, 70% failed in trying to achieve a successful wealth transition. Now, that challenge is actually compounded further, and the failure rate increases to 90% by the third generation. So the statistics show you that whilst it's a challenge to achieve wealth in the first place, handing it down is a whole nother challenge in itself, and not as easy as it may seem. Now, the term successful transition is defined as wealth remaining under control to the beneficiaries who have actually received the wealth. If the wealth, once it's been received, has actually changed format, so let's say, for example, you have assets which sort of turn into cash or businesses being sold, that's not part of the measure between success and failure. This is just simply referring to wealth being transferred and it being remained under control in its current format. So what I wanted to do with this take flight is just simply not go into all of the details because it's very there's many layers to this, but just provide you with some of the insights as to what are the key drivers behind such a high failure rate, and give you a few seeds. I want to plant a few seeds for you to go away with and then think about, what does this look like for me and my family, and how can I research into some of these elements further. So here are the 3 key drivers behind why the failure rate is so high amongst that study with wealthy families. The first driver, which accounts to 60% of the failure rate, is around a breakdown in communication and trust. So this is all about, the ability to speak openly and freely amongst your family about the wealth and the plan, way before it's actually time to actually pass that wealth down. So what's that communication like over a number of years, maybe even decades? Is there a common action amongst the family, or are there always disagreements, tensions, which tend to create a level of fracture? Trust plays a major role in this communication. So do family members do what they actually say they're going to do? This is when in talking about the wealth, what the plan is once it's actually then being transferred over. And it's a two-way street. It's those that actually have the wealth and also the beneficiaries that are actually looking to also receive it. Sincerity plays a big part in this. Does the individual's internal story match up to what he or she has presented to the world? Again, that applies to both sides. How genuine is that wealth plan? The other point here is, does the beneficiary have the competence to accomplish the task at hand? So 60% of the failure rate is rooted in a breakdown in communication and trust, and obviously that extends to sort of, there's even more deeper points within that. The second point, which accounts to 25% of the failure rate, is the failure to prepare the beneficiaries for the wealth. So this is all about, how well is a family at developing the necessary skills, awareness, and understanding the task at hand in order to receive wealth. And what I like about this conversation is, irrespective of how much wealth is being transferred, creating wealth is one skill set, managing wealth is another skill set, keeping the wealth is also another skill set. So I think the idea of just sort of accumulating wealth and thinking that's actually going to solve all of the issues, because then you're in a position to actually give, in many ways, passing wealth down without the necessary education, skill set, and awareness is actually setting up the next set of families and beneficiaries for failure. You also have to think about, in this particular category, interest changes over time. Life experiences change over time. So how does that play a role in the wealth plan, and in terms of who should receive what from a beneficiary standpoint? I may have a wealth plan today, but that certainly should look a little bit differently, 10, 15, 20, 25 years, 30 years into the journey, because the people that the children and the people that I want to give the wealth to, things can change in that part. So 25% is related to the failure to prepare the beneficiaries for the wealth. And the final driver, which accounts to 15% of the failure, is sort of that all other category and buckets. And that's mainly around sort of tax consideration. Sometimes there's legal issues and mission planning. And so it's really then important to have the right professionals and accountants and advisors around to understand what they're actually doing. There can be some, misaccounting, that could also play a role in wealth not being transferred properly. When we talk about the family mission, is there an agreement on the long-term wealth? What are the roles within the family unit? So, but the number one, key takeaway that I want to leave you with is to understand that from this takeaway, your biggest threat to wealth succession is the breakdown in communication and trust within your family. So what you have to really start doing now, if this is something which matters to you, is start developing these habits as early as possible. Start understanding, what does excellent communication and trust look like? Look to maybe redefine what you already think it is. And how can you think about ingraining that fabric and DNA into the family now, and make it a family culture, rather than waiting until the time you're actually looking to pass the wealth down. And I think the biggest misconception is thinking that once I've accumulated the wealth, I can just manage it and hold it for a period of time, and then I'll be able to pass it on to my children or beneficiaries, who will then be able to benefit from the wealth. It's a lot more work to it. It's much more of a science. And I think the biggest thing to take away from this is that there were 3,250 families who had accumulated wealth. 70% of those failed to pass it on. So that should be a big alarming statistic for us all to pay attention to, that sort of communication and trust element within our family unit. So I hope that episode has helped. I'd really encourage you to sort of dig deeper into, that driver, and what does that look like for you and your family, and how can you not be part of that statistic and be part of that 30% of success rate. If you've got any questions, please feel free to reach out to us on Instagram or email us. We'll be happy to sort of have a conversation with you around some of these points and get your views and thoughts as to maybe succession plans and wealth plans that you may have seen in your own personal experience. We'd love to hear what you think. Until next time.
Take off, take flight with you. Yeah, for we never fly, but